How can online hate speech be stopped? Internet firms are criticised as New Zealand mourns the mosque shooting victims. Is it time to regulate social media and the darkest corners of the web? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. New Zealand is in shock and mourning after the worst attack in its history. 49 worshippers in 2 mosques were shot dead whilst saying Friday prayers. Police in Christchurch arrested Brenton Tarrant. He's appeared in court charged with murder. He was remanded without entering a plea. After the attack was live-streamed on Facebook, detectives are focusing on the perpetrator's online activities and his posting of a so-called manifesto, which is full of far-right, ultra-nationalist and anti-Muslim views. And Tarrant vows to carry out a revenge attack against what he calls the invaders. Al Jazeera's Andrew Thomas sets up our discussion from Christchurch.
Handcuffed and dressed in white prison clothes, Australian-born Brenton Tarrant stood before a judge charged with murder.
You are remanded without plea.
Tarrant is the main suspect of an attack at this mosque in Christchurch. This was the scene shortly after the gunman opened fire at worshippers.
He came to the front of the door and he started shooting the people. The people, they coming to run to the front because the guy, he was behind of the people, and one of my friend, he was next to me, he got the shot to the head until he fall over to the front of me, and the other people, they shooting, they bleeding, they crying.
The gunman live streamed his attack on Facebook as he indiscriminately opened fire on more than 200 Muslim worshippers. Shortly after that shooting, there was a similar attack on worshippers at Linwood Mosque about 10 minutes away. At least 49 people were killed, while nearly as many were left injured. Among the 39 patients admitted to hospital are children as young as 2 years old.
4 patients died on their way into the hospital yesterday, dying before they arrived. Those injured ranged in ages from the very young to quite elderly patients. 11 of them are in the intensive care unit, including 1 female aged in her mid-20s. All of those in ICU are what we would consider critically ill.
Police have arrested a number of suspects. New Zealand's Prime Minister said they weren't on security watch lists. Arriving with a bomb disposal robot, the police have started their investigation in Dunedin, a small city to the south of Christchurch, where the main suspect lived. The area was evacuated as a precaution. Earlier, police had discovered 2 bombs in the main suspect's car. The unprecedented violence has prompted the government to commit to changing gun control laws.
My understanding is he held a Category A gun licence, and again, I preface this that my advice currently is that he, under that gun licence, was able to legally acquire the guns that he held. That will give you an indication of why we need to change our gun laws.
The national threat level has been raised from low to high as police, politicians and the public come to terms with the worst and most shocking attack they've ever experienced.
All day people have been gathering here near the Al Noor Mosque, laying flowers and just standing in quiet contemplation. There are a lot of questions to be answered about how this attack happened, but there's a lot of grief and solidarity to be expressed too. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Christchurch.
So let's bring in our panel for today's discussion. From Wellington in New Zealand, we're joined by Tahir Nawaz, who's the president of the International Muslim Association of New Zealand. From Berlin, Raphael Bossong, who's a research associate at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. And from Enschede in the Netherlands, via Skype, we have technology ethicist Nolen Gertz. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Tahir Nawaz, if we start with you, yours obviously a community in mourning. To what extent has the proliferation of video footage of the attack impacted upon those affected by the tragedy, those in your community?
As we all know, that incident itself is a big shock, and as people are devastated with just the incident itself. But having this video, I think it's just that people have made people cry, and they can't really believe that how this thing has been well planned as a terrorist attack. I would say it without doubt, as the attack was well planned, and people are they are just devastated.
Tahir, before yesterday, had you or anyone in your community been the victim of hate speech or race hate?
In our city, in Wellington in particular, no, we don't have any such cases. However, we do hear that Christchurch, where the incident occurred, there is occasionally incidents there for the hate speech and things like that, yeah.
Raphael, Bossong, the Guardian newspaper in the UK, in its editorial on Saturday, said the birth, growth and resilience of the far right, which once festered in dark nooks and crannies, has been assisted by the in-group echo chambers of social media. It now festers in plain sight. Is it time to regulate the idea of free speech on the internet?
Well, there is not a simple answer to that, and every country has a slightly different approach and also national tradition. It is clear that the right-wing extremists have benefited, similar to jihadists, from the new means of technology and proliferation of propaganda material. However, it's another question to then define what sort of is still legitimate free speech or also legitimate expression of radical ideas, and then when does it tip over in something more sinister, darker, potentially turning towards terrorism. So in Germany, because of its historical experience, there is a body of laws that actually incriminates or criminalizes speech that fosters ethnic hatred, and that can be used as then a second step to take online providers more into responsibility. But that doesn't apply to countries like to the US, where there is a much more radical understanding of free speech. So I think we have to take it from there and then ask the question about how can we regulate platforms and the internet.
Nolen Gertz, this television channel has to abide by regulations concerning taste and decency. It's a matter of law. We're not allowed to broadcast certain pictures or live footage if it breaks those or violates those regulations. Shouldn't social media platforms be forced to abide by the same sort of regulations?
Right. Well, it does seem like there has to be some better understanding of the role that social media platforms play in terrorist attacks like this, and even in events that lead up to this. So at the same time that social media is trying to increase its engagement, trying to increase its business, it has to understand on the same side that that increases its responsibility. On the other hand, you have to understand that you don't want to simply leave it to the social media companies to self-regulate. So I think you're right that there does have to be some understanding. For example, when YouTube is perfectly capable of taking down copyrighted material, it seems that there has to be some similar mechanisms in place to take down violent and hate-related material as well.
Yeah, if they're going to get sued, they're pretty quick to act on it, aren't they? I mean, that's what you're essentially saying there. As far as copyrighted material is concerned, if someone else's material is broadcast in someone else's video, they're going to get sued. They're pretty quick to act on it then. But not, it seems, with stuff that violates standards of taste and decency.
Right, exactly. And I think this raises the question of how much they lean on simply reporting mechanisms of allowing sort of users to do the work for them. At the same time, they have people around the world who are sort of moderating the content, but they don't get paid very well. So you either have people who are voluntarily doing it or people who are underpaid doing it.
Tahir, Nawaz, is the internet a safe place for Muslims, given the proliferation of hate speech that we're seeing online right now?
I think the way the social media is going, I think it's not a matter of Muslim or not Muslim. It's a matter of the way it's been used and utilized. And I'll say it fully, the way it's brainwashed other people, especially the youth. In this occasion, we can see it very clear that a young man, 28 years old, he is very proudly do this terrorist act, and and also broadcasted live as well. The worst part is that the video itself has affected many people, and second part is that it took a while that the government have to stop, or I mean they took the necessary actions to stop this video. And the last important thing I would say that the people who would be watching either intentionally or innocently, and they also get watched by the government as well. So there's a lot of things that interrelated with it. When it comes to the materials like this, because there are a lot of people, they will watch it as just innocently, and then they still will get into the watch list from the government.
Raphael, picking up on Tahir's first point there, the web giants YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, they've all repeatedly vowed to crack down on violent extremism and hate-related content, yet as events have shown in New Zealand, they seem simply unable to staunch this viral propagation of disturbing and violent content in real time. At the very least, should people's ability to stream live on these platforms be restricted?
Well, I think that last one is actually extremely challenging to regulate because live is live. And unless you want to take this option away completely from users, which I think would be difficult to do nowadays.
Why? Because
I think the best that...
Raphael, why would it be difficult to do? Because the world muddled along quite nicely before the internet came along. I mean, there was a time when we weren't able to stream live on Facebook. Why should it matter?
Well, I didn't want to come across as kind of defeatist, but just imagine, I mean, these platforms are global, and then that would require some global change to say now this option is not only on Facebook, but also other potential alternatives that are always bringing up or trying to vie for this market, now banned, now that this technology is out in the open and people are used to it. So I think that would be a very challenging thing to do, to control all possibilities of live streaming. It's another matter to then say, okay, once we have an indication that there's something horrific going on, that we really try our very, very best to kind of contain this spread as quickly as possible. And again, there is no miracle solution out there. But the idea would be, yes, exactly, that some automated systems would be able to pick up very quickly on something like that, and then try to sort of at least make it a fringe phenomenon rather than something that's easily accessible. If I may just say one more thing, I think it's a balance of three factors in general, just beyond the live streaming. The one is, okay, who do you actually want to reach? Is it just the big platforms, which are easily accessible, or do you also want to get at the fringe sort of forums where apparently also the attacker perpetrated? And then you have to think about what the tools you need for those 8chan or telegrams or whatever else. So it's that also we need to think about.
Yeah,
the second thing is that, if I may, one thing, like we've had a lot of investments into controlling jihadi propaganda, and it's not done, but we have had a resource, we had an effect there, but we haven't had the same resource against right-wing extremism, and I think that's what we rather think of, that we shift more attention, just in pure money and people, to right-wing extremism.
Nolen, do you want to comment on that? Has there been too much focus on radical Islam by the social media companies, by those who police content, and not enough attention to right-wing extremism?
Right. Well, I think this is part of the problem, is that there's, especially when talking about things like Islamophobia, that there is a degree of normalization such that even just being a news corporation, if you show speeches, for example, President Trump, it's hard not to be engaging in right-wing propaganda. So at the same time that you want to monitor what users are uploading, you also have to monitor what world leaders are saying. So it has to be at the same time a greater responsibility in the political sphere more widely as to what is taken for granted as normal speech.
Tahir, do you agree with that? Do our political leaders bear any responsibility for the kind of act that was committed in Christchurch?
I would say that the way, as a New Zealanders, we would never imagine this thing will happen. And those people that was involved, they were not in a watch list. So it's very difficult to say from me being a New Zealander that they should take the responsibility. Yes, there is some things that know that how we move forward. That's what we should be focusing. From here. But what in context of the responsibility from the political side of it, I think New Zealand government itself, they're supporting us very well. They look after us, and we totally feel that we never been, I would say that treated as a Muslim as a special that are different from any other religion.
Okay. I just want to break off for a minute to show you, gentlemen, a clip. The World Wide Web celebrated its 30th birthday last week, and its inventor, Tim Berners-Lee, told us that it's time to rethink how tech companies, governments and people engage with the web. Here's what he had to say.
Right now, a lot of people, after 30 years, people are looking at what's happening and they're worried that there's a lot of deliberately or accidentally information which is actually not true. There are people being nasty out there, and there are people who feel that in their lives, that the cyberbullying is more important to them than being able to participate, and so that they have to drop out. So the utopian dreams of the future, they're still in a way alive and well, but we need a mid-course correction to the web at this 30-year point.
Raphael, a mid-course correction the web needs at this point, according to its inventor, Tim Berners-Lee. There are rules governing free speech for traditional media. Why should the internet be a free-for-all, where people can say things anonymously that they wouldn't dare say face-to-face or on a platform where they could be identified?
Well, you're right to criticize that, but what I was trying to say is that, I don't want to say we can't do nothing, but at the same time, it is also unrealistic to expect that we have this kind of complete changeover and that we could regulate this global, extremely diverse medium. The internet is very, very complex in a way that this would just disappear. So I think the best thing what we can do is, yes, increase legal basis for taking things down, to act quicker, and also harmonize that. I think I agree with that. And a German experience has shown that this may be something, which is not necessarily immediately leading to censorship, but can be quite reasonable. But we also have to be realistic in the expectations that we will not be able to contain everything, to kind of drain every swamp, every channel that these extremists and other radicals are trying to use. And the main thing that we have to do is to foster a mainstream discourse, and the normal media has an important responsibility here, that we really are clear this is fringe, this is not something that resonates wider with society and politicians. And I think so we have to come from both ends.
How about you, Nolen? What do you think about these mid-course corrections? To what extent does China perhaps have the right idea? In that in China, you can still do your shopping online, you can still catch up on the news, you can email and chat with friends, you can exchange holiday pictures and videos. You just can't express certain views online. If China can do it, why can't the rest of the world do it?
Right. Well, China has clearly sort of shown us the extreme of the ability of a government to regulate the internet. And I certainly don't think we want to go down that road. I think rather what we want to do is to have a better understanding, on the one hand, of what speech, as Raphael was just saying, of what speech is really mainstream and which is extreme. On the other hand, I think we have to have a better understanding of the role that the algorithms on the platforms are playing in directing people to this kind of video content. So at the same time, about whether or not they're able to police the content once it's up there, you also have to understand whether the algorithms focusing on maximizing engagement, maximizing ad views, are really playing a role in radicalizing the people who are just going to YouTube to watch music videos.
Tahir, should people using the internet be forced to take more responsibility for their actions online? I mean, here we are talking about the big social media companies, but people who republished video of the attack in Christchurch or republished comments praising the attacker, may have broken the law as it applies to citizens of New Zealand. Should New Zealand go after these people and prosecute them in its courts, make an example of them?
Firstly, I think that definitely there is a responsibility for the user when they share this material. They know about it, that the material could harm other people and could affect other people. Similarly, they are well educated enough in this area, because at the moment all things are new. In last 10 years, things has been dramatically changed, and everyone using a media. Yes and no, because to charging them or punishing them in a court of law is not that easy, because the person who shares it, it all depends why they're sharing it. They want to share it to let people know that what happened, or they want to share it that to do the more harm. Finding that intention, why this was shared, it would be very difficult, and it's unless there is the people need to be educated.
Okay.
All right. It can be educated from the childhood, from the schools, that what could be the damages of effective messaging. You know.
Tahir, I'm sorry to cut you short. We're rapidly running out of time. Raphael, I want to take on this issue of web anonymity with you. You mentioned 8chan, where the attacker was able to anonymously publish his manifesto, his intentions, his links to the Facebook live stream of the attack. Should internet anonymity be abolished? I mean, say what you want, this issue of free speech on the web, but only if the world, I suppose more importantly, the ISPs at least, know who you are and can pass information on to the relevant authorities if you overstep the mark.
Again, it's not possible to abolish anonymity completely, but yes, we should make it harder. We should restrict the rooms where anonymity prevails, and we have to create a transnationally working arrangement to get at these identities. And that's often the case, that, you know, in one country you have rules for that, but across borders that breaks down. So I think that's something to look into. But I think the key thing with 8chan is not the anonymity, but basically that they only have laws, they only refer to US laws and child pornography and not other form of extremism. And there is the regulatory gap that 8chan moderators have to take and address, and not the anonymity. But again, anonymity is also something that needs legal transnational arrangements to break that barrier.
Nolen, the final word to you then. Who should hold the responsibility for policing this global phenomenon, the internet? What resources should they be allocated, considering that budgets for law enforcement generally around the world are being reduced?
Right. Well, I think this is really the biggest problem, is the question of the business models really promoting, again, this sort of drive to engagement, drive to extremism, and the degree to which the users themselves sort of repeat that model. So you have people, like you were saying, sharing things on 8chan, 4chan, YouTube, Facebook, because, again, they understand, much like the companies that they're working with, that drives content, drives views, drives money. So it's, again, I think, about trying to understand the business model itself and the degree to which that itself is the danger.
So, I mean, as you said, though, that we can't leave this to the companies themselves to police. There has to be some sort of external body to enforce the rules, doesn't there?
Right. So I think on the one hand, you have to have the companies working with regulators on national or international level. On the other hand, you have to make more transparent the way that the algorithms working on these platforms are driving people towards this content in the first place.
Gentlemen, I'm not quite sure we've solved the problem, but it was an extremely interesting discussion. It's perhaps a more complicated issue than many people, including me, realise. Thank you for your time. Tahir, Nawaz, Raphael, Bossong and Nolen Gertz. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, you can see the programme again anytime just by going to the website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us at our Facebook page. You can find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.